This is the 2018 Genesis G80 Sport. For anyone who is new to the Genesis brand, think of its involvement with Hyundai as the same relationship between Lexus and Toyota, Acura with Honda, Infiniti with Nissan. In fact, the Genesis started out as a model of the Hyundai and now has evolved into its own brand. And in its introduction, it's got the G70, G80, and the G90 models. Think of it as the equivalent to BMW 3 Series, 5 Series, and 7 Series. What we have here today is the G80 Sport. And you may ask, what differs the Sport from the regular G80? The exterior differences are actually quite minimal. Nearly everything is identical aside from the wheels, front grille, and the use of an elegant copper accent. Somehow though, these minimal changes manage such an appeal and impression. Perhaps I'm a sucker for this bronzed copper finish, but it somehow works. The rear end is much more of a typical G80, which I see as an inoffensive yet unmemorable design. So how does the sportiness translate into the interior cabin, you might ask? Well, the Genesis designers have thought about that too, and the one thing that screams sportiness is carbon fiber. Fake carbon fiber, but carbon fiber. Front dash door trims, the rear door trims are all carbon fiber. Do we as an industry in 2018 still believe that carbon fiber trim makes your interior seem more sporty? Other things that Genesis has also included within the interior to spice it up the same way that the exterior is would actually be the same use of that copper finish. You'll see it here in the Genesis clock, and also the stitching of the seats and leather are also done in a copper finish, which is actually quite a nice touch. I'm quite a fan of that. Otherwise, this is a typical Genesis G80 interior. Now, what do we know about Genesis? They're obviously going to jam-pack their entire cabin with all the latest safety technology and also all the nicest and luxurious features. And there's no difference here. That's what Hyundai has made a name doing, and that's their value proposition, that they have an advantage over everyone else. And in this Genesis G80 model, you don't see any blank buttons. Everything is equipped as you would ever require it to be, and it's all done at the standard base price. So essentially there's no options to opt in for. And that's all fine and dandy, and you might ask, what more would you need then? If I were to spec a equivalent BMW to this same effect and the same engine, you're looking at around a $20,000 premium. But the main issue for me is, as great and as nice the interior is, it still lags behind the nicer Mercedes and the nicer BMWs. They feel and touch and look quite simply a generation newer. That means any of the exterior lust that you might have acquired is quickly diminished when you actually sit inside. Several other issues with the interior. Though it's very well equipped and it's very convincing, there's quite a lot of buttons and technology that is quite simply shared with the rest of the Hyundai family. And perhaps that's not such a bad thing, because you are sharing the same technology that gets mass produced into millions of cars, meaning that they are going to be functional, they're going to be well thought through, and they'll probably last for quite a while. However, the issue is that the premium aspect doesn't carry over. And perhaps that's the minor issue here. Yes, you are creating a value proposition for your cars. However, Genesis is still competing in a premium luxury brand and asking for a large sum of money at the end of the day, $62,000 for this example. Otherwise, the interior is still a nice place to sit in, and everything does work quite functionally, except for the touchscreen. Everything within this multimedia unit is a lag behind. Even the touchscreen, which is, again, very recognizably Hyundai, seems to lag and seems to be less responsive than the example that I saw in a 2016 Hyundai Elantra, which I drive quite extensively. Well, what about the functional side of the interior cabin, which I think you can't really complain. There's quite a lot of storage, it's extremely comfortable, and there are very few compromises sitting at this spot. But the real question is still not answered. What is the Sport in the G80? And I think to find out, we have to go for a ride. So to start things off, the G80 Sport is powered by a twin turbocharged 3.3 liter V6, and it makes good for 365 horsepower and 376 pound-feet of torque. And that torque comes as low down as 1300 RPM, which is nearly at idle. So on a day-to-day basis, it has much more grunt than you would ever need. Now, what about the handling? This is a heavy car, 4,500 pounds in fact, and from the driver's seat, it definitely does feel that heavy. Suspension tuning is actually done quite well. It allows for some body roll so that you can weigh in on the tires and throw your weight around a little bit, but it doesn't compromise on too much comfort. Now, albeit the steering feel and in fact pedal feel are quite vague, you don't really get much information from them. Is it anything as good as the Cadillac CTS? Definitely not. That was very precise. That was a precision tool. This one wallows around a bit, but I'm not going to take too much away for it because I've now formed the opinion that this car really isn't all that sporty at all. What I would consider this is just a regular G80 with a far nicer exterior, at least in my opinion. But perhaps that 3.3 liter twin turbocharged V6 is a compelling enough choice for you to opt for the Sport model. But even then, I'm not convinced. If I could have my way, I would have this G80 Sport with the 5 liter V8 found in the regular G80. I drove that V8 in the G90 model and was quite simply blown away. It has 420 horsepower and 383 pound-feet of torque. But to be fair, even if it didn't have more power, I would still opt for the V8 because it was so smooth. None of that coarseness that I mentioned here. It was just so compliant all the time. It's never abrupt, it's never violent, or it's never aggressive. It's just a wave of power that is always assuring. And in my opinion, on a day-to-day drive, on a commuter car, that's exactly what you want. You want something that can be relaxing and can chew up the miles for days. Yes, you may get a little bit less oomph down low, and your fuel efficiency will also suffer slightly. But that V8, to me, is what completes this overall experience. There are quite a lot of impressive aspects about the Genesis that should be celebrated, but I walk away feeling that this is not entirely convincing. It's not the complete package that the German, or in fact some of the American brands offer. In the German rivals, everything that you touch, feel, and see is quite simply a cut above. Once you sit into this G80, there are just certain aspects that quite simply nag you. Nag you for the fact that you've spent $62,000, but for the most part, are driving a car that is mainly equipped with economy box parts. If you can look past that, I think this is a great car and obviously a great proposition. I myself just can't. I'm not sure how quickly it's going to depreciate. I'm not sure the exterior look is going to age as well as some of the other Germans. And in general, I just don't think it creates a complete enough experience for someone to sign on the dotted line. The Genesis G80, and more broadly speaking the Genesis brand, will always hold a strong value proposition. The issue is that value propositions are less valued in the luxury premium segment, especially when considering a $63,000 price tag in a segment that is well saturated. I see what Genesis has done here, in fact across the entire Hyundai brand. They've undersold all their competitors by filling their cars to the brim with technology and features, and it's perfect, especially under the Hyundai name. But they've reused too much of those tech, features, and execution in the Genesis brand, and I really don't know how it'll hold up in this high-priced altitude.